Hello, welcome to Monmouth University's Pollak Gallery. Thank you for coming out tonight. A year ago, this gentleman walked in my office with artwork, loose. He said, "What do you think? Can you give us a show?" And I looked at the work and I said, "Absolutely." So he worked, I hope I'm not telling your story, David. He worked for a solid year preparing the work that he had collected over many years. And it looks absolutely stunning. So we're really happy that he brought it to us. The story behind it is so interesting, and the tie-in to the community, the rec community, is also really kind of nice about this. And we also have a friend who's a writer who we asked to come to take a look at the work to either write a story or a book about this gentleman, because it's just so compelling. It's such a great story. Anyway, I don't want to take any more of anyone else's language, copy, thunder. I am happy to introduce Professor Richard Brewer, who I've known for maybe 30 years as a professor in the English department here at Monmouth University, who was a personal friend of Jame Deane. So here he is, Professor Brewer.
Well, I guess I should say here I am notwithstanding, because I had a bad fall several days ago, and so a little bit shaky from the fall still, I think. But this is a wonderful crowd, and it's very much appreciated and very wonderful to see everybody. I call this Reminiscences of Jame Deane. There are a lot of personal memories of James, and I hope you will feel you learn something about this man, whom I first met at a Quaker meeting way back in 1968 at a private home in the Highlands. I mention this because James, to me, has always been a spiritual person, and I think this quality shows in many of his works. The landscapes, for example, have a haunting, transcendental quality, and the flowers, at least to me, many of them look as fresh as they did on the day of creation. So it reminds me a little bit, some of his work reminds me a little bit of Blake, and a little bit of somebody like Edward Hicks, another Quaker painter who did many depictions of the peaceable kingdom. He's famous for that. James was born in 1906 and grew up in Long Branch. His sister Laura was 4 years older than he. Their parents were from Vermont, and his father was a reporter for a local paper. I learned from James. I think he was also something as a builder. His forebears were among the earliest settlers of New England, and if you listen very carefully to James, you could detect something of an old-fashioned New England accent. The word yes, for example, with James was always 2 syllables. He and Laura attended local schools where they were very conscientious, even exceptional students. So exceptional that James was chosen valetudinarian of his high school class, where he graduated in 1925. James always said that the 1920s were a time of great optimism. Things were good and they were going to get better, was the feeling. His early reading favorites, or the early reading favorites of both of them really, were the L. Frank Baum, the Oz collection of Oz books, which they literally read to pieces. I mean that because I've seen the books in pieces after having been read so many times. A little later, they became interested in the Arabian Nights, and considerably later in the novels of Jane Austen. They both loved all of those books. Quite a bit later, I think, James became interested in botany, too, one of his great interests. When he was not in the parlor of his house, or readily available, Laura would say, "I'm sure James is back working in the garden." He loved to work in the garden. And another very favorite topic of his was folklore and legend. He had a great many books on these subjects. And his specialty and his special love was the Celtic mythology. James took advantages of the cultural aspects and the amenities of Philadelphia when he was a student at the art school beginning in 1926, the Penn Museum School of Industrial Art, where he studied oil painting, watercolor, pen and ink, work with clay, and other things. He told me that the school also taught regular college courses, history, English, science, and so forth. So he had a quite exhaustive education over those years. He told me something interesting a couple of times. He said the students, the great aim or attitude of many of the students was if they could only illustrate the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. That was a big aim of a lot of the students in those days. He graduated in 1930, which was really not a very good year, because that was the beginning of the Great Depression, when the most popular song for a couple of years in the early 30s was "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" Jobs were impossible to find. And so James was really never regularly employed. He became a freelance artist. He did, however, exhibit in Philadelphia, New York, and I think Trenton during those years, where he sold probably a few pieces, but not that many of his works, because people couldn't afford them, I guess, or most people couldn't. Around this time, he told me he joined the Arch Street Friends Meeting, one of the very old meetings in Philadelphia. And quite a bit later on, he became its secretary. His sister Laura had already been teaching for a few years at the Porter School in Rumson, which is now named the Deane Porter School in honor of her. So her work and the rent of an adjoining house, which belonged to a relative, enabled them to live comfortably. They both loved cats. They always had cats in their house, and they always gave generously to animal charities. They also loved to celebrate a very old-fashioned Christmas. They always carefully chose a tree and decorated it with innumerable antique ornaments that belonged to their parents and grandparents. It was decidedly an old-fashioned Christmas. They were both kind, considerate people. I can say that with real knowledge of them. My mother, who knew them, described them, and I quote her exactly, "old-fashioned, dependable people." And that's exactly what they were. A friend of mine who was only an acquaintance of James's had lost both his parents around the time of Christmas. And he told me that he felt so alone during the holidays. He said, I feel such loneliness. James said, "I would have invited him to spend Christmas Eve with us had I known," which I thought was very considerate and kind of him. James, another thing about James was that he had a phenomenal memory. I don't think I've known anyone with such a marvelous memory as his. He had vivid memory. One of the earliest memories he had was of the Titanic. And when I told him that there had been a Broadway musical about the sinking of the Titanic, he just couldn't believe it. That was, I guess he remembered it as a great tragedy, of course. He also remembered the great hurricane of 1914, which saw the demolition of the very elegant Octagon Hotel in Seabright. And he remembered vividly also Woodrow Wilson's visit to Shadow Lawn in 1916, where Wilson accepted his bid for a second term. You couldn't fool James about history either. He knew his history, and especially knew a lot about the ruling families and their relatives. A good friend of mine who also attended the meeting, was about my age, named Carl, was talking to him about the death of Diana at that time. And James said, "Oh, it reminds me," he said, "of the great outpouring of grief that occurred when the first wife of the Emperor Theodosius had died back in the 4th century." I looked up the lady's name, which was Aelia Flaccilla. Not exactly a household word anymore, but he remembered those things. James was also, as you can see, imaginative and visionary. He noticed things that most of us might pass by. I thought of saying of Blake, "If the doors of our perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite." In 1931 and 32, he took a class in modern poetry at Rutgers University, and he kept extensive notes on the poems. I have these notes, and they are fascinating reading. He commented on a poem by Sarah Teasdale, where she says, "Things look so different under different weather conditions," and so forth. And this is what James wrote. I give you his exact words. "To those who are alert for them, there are moments when even the most ordinary places are transformed into something rich and strange. A snowfall, a spring wind, a sunset, twilight, fog, all have the power to create these illusions. On a misty day, I have seen the most prosaic office building appear for the time as a high screen of silver set with jewels, each in its onyx panel." An incredible description. And I have to say also that James was conscientious to a fault. Conscientious. He used to spend hours and hours on his income tax. Probably far more than necessary. Once a good friend of mine was looking all over, he tried antique shops and everything. He was looking for an old wooden wheelbarrow, and he wanted to put it in his garden as a kind of planter. And I said, "I think I know somebody who has one like that." Of course, James had one in very good condition, which my friend was very happy to buy for $50. And James said to me, I guess he was working on his taxes, he said, "You know, I'm afraid I'm going to have to report this on my income tax." It was something that his father purchased back in 1914 or 15. And I said, "James, I don't think the government will hound you down." He was a serious man, but not without a certain dry humor. In his last years, he spent sometimes in a rehab center near Red Bank. Once an aide left him sitting in a wheelchair in the hallway for at least 2.5, possibly 3 hours. And I went to visit him, and I said, "Oh, I'll call someone to get you back into your room." And he said, shook his head, he said, "Sometimes they move with the velocity of a glacier." Which I thought worthy of Churchill or at least W.C. Fields. So that's a little indication of James's humor. He was a wonderful person to know, a dear and precious friend, and a wise counselor. Carl and I, the other gentleman I mentioned, when we had problems and we thought were serious problems, we could always ask James what his advice might be. And he always gave a deliberate, calm, and almost always very helpful piece of advice. He was a dear friend, and I miss him very much. But I know he would be delighted that people are enjoying his artwork. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Kind of speechless. Thank you, Kelly, and everybody at the college for doing this. And I don't know what else to say. I've shown the work a lot over the past few years out of the back of my pickup. So it's so much nicer to see it up here.
These are on my neck, too.
Huh?
These are on my neck, too.
Yeah. But I'm glad you're enjoying it, and really thank you so much.
You did all the
Yeah. Somebody out of the local flea market bought me 2 plates that were over there in the cabinet, and over a period of 3-4 years, I just kept telling him how much I enjoyed the plates, and then out came a box of drawings, and he said, "Would you be interested in these?" And I go, "Yeah," and it just slowly
So
kept.
where did that come from?
He's a friend of the family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I realized I had enough to approach the college. And then once I started matting and framing it, it became a huge pile in the dining room.
Extremely well done.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
Some of them are in their original frames with real nice writing on the back, like the little original price tags.
Are
And
you going to be reproducing any of them for sale?
I don't know what's going to happen from here. I think they're worthy of it.
Now, this is not a permanent collection, correct? This is just here for the time being?
Yeah,
And then where will it go from here?
back in the boxes in my dining room. Yeah, it'll be here till the end of October.
So would you think about showing it at other venues?
Yes, absolutely. Good, I'd like to see it go to another spot.
To another college or to
Yeah.
a library or,
Yeah.
it's just beautiful.
This gentleman and Vaughn really deserve a great deal of credit. I think it's a good gentleman.
Who framed everything?
A good part of it. I mean, what's nice is some of them are still in their original frames from the 30s, which is really cool.
Is this the entire collection that you have?
Yeah, and I'm hoping some people see this and have it at home and some other work comes out.
Were there any dates on the, maybe on the back?
Yeah, there's some dates on the back, and the latest date that I can find, I'm not sure if it's on a piece of work at home, but it's like 1935, 36, and then the earliest is 32, but then after that, there's nothing.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and then there's a, great big vacant space.
Are majority undated? Is 1935 on this wall or?
Yeah, most of them are undated. I have one at home of a Christmas cactus, and I believe it's 1932, which is nicely done because it's done December 25th.
You can find them at 48, 41, or 42.
I'm not sure about that. 30s.
But he did do things, continued to do things throughout the years, because I know he gave some friends of mine a floral picture back in '66. And he also made the little picture in '76 for the bicentennial. So he's still doing it.
I think this would be wonderful to share with garden club people and horticulture people. It would be wonderful to perhaps go to meetings and give talks No, you should bring your
One mentioned something about it, but I really don't know about that part. I mean, it's been so much to look into, right? You can see his humor in some of the pictures, too.
did you have to do conservation on these, or were these found in great condition, or have
Some
they
of
been
the- some of
regarded
these
through the
are
decades?
on the original maps below, which probably should come off. The glue up top, it is easily popped off. These were all tacked in underneath, and I did slip a piece of archival paper underneath to get it away from the mat.
Uh-huh.
So, but the paper itself is still like, I can't believe how white it is. For being in a box. Some of these were still wrapped in the newspaper from 1939. So that's kind of how unseen they were.
And that could date them too.
Yeah, well, they were put away at that point. Yeah.
None of his that I know. No.
Professor Brewer, was his art around, was he extroverted about his talent? Was it hanging all over the house? or-
No, they were not around. The only thing that I knew of were some of the floral watercolors that he gave to friends. That's the only thing that I saw. I never saw these imaginative pieces of art. I didn't know that he even did them. He was very modest and very quiet. Very, very private person.
Professor Brewer, I just want to say that you were wonderful, and Professor Brewer was my professor in 1961 when I was a freshman here. And so I had seen the show before. It's just breathtaking, absolutely lovely. But I really came to hear you, and you're just as great as you were back
I remember her fondly as a student. An excellent student.
Because I do read and I am in pentameter, I'm the only one who has to do
I'm glad you still remember that. That's I sometimes ask students what they remember, and some of them it wasn't.
I noticed that on some of the watercolors, that it said on the bottom, illustration for a story that he was going to write or
Yeah.
was writing.
There was a story about he possibly and his sister doing a book of children's, and
Little pictures of the case.
yeah, there's a notebook back there that is filled with little drawings of imaginative figures. I'll see if I can pull it out. There's like little leaf figures, people that are strange little animals. I mean, the book is just filled with them. And that was, again, just a bunch of paper in a bottle box that I archivally put in this book to get everything kind of easy to look at. But I mean, somewhere along the lines, there was something going on for some kind of illustration or a book. People ask me all the time, what did he illustrate? There's nothing that I know of. But you can see he was heading towards something.
95. 2001.
He was born in 1906. But I find it amazing that there's not, a large body of work that's after this 30s. Again, hopefully something will appear, people will see this and say, hey, I have one of those at home, or...
I think some of the florals are later date.
Not because the matting and the tags on the back are all from the same era. There's little tags on the art shops that frame the matted.
It's in the house that they lived in. Has that been sold?
Yes, his house
Renovated?
has been renovated. It's over a big old house on Bath Avenue.
And the people who bought it from them, has anybody contacted them to find out how their property was?
I think the house was pretty well fit.
Yeah, I heard through the grapevine the house was empty.
And nobody knows what happened.
No, I don't even know how this managed to slip through the cracks. Yeah.
Is there any other artist or any other, well, I guess I would say artist, that you have gotten this involved with your career? This is really fascinating.
No. I mean, I know art. I was just putting it together.
And you found it earlier in flea markets and stuff like that?
Yeah. And then it was coming to once they realized that. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Good.